he is absolutely right. The math is not adding up here. I don't want to spend my entire life working towards my kids being able to pay my mortgage. Because that's the world we're currently living in. Hey, so what I'm going to be talking about today is a recent podcast that Pierre went on to with Jordan Peterson. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, obviously. Honestly, I have yet to watch the whole entire thing, but I want to touch upon upon what some of the things that Pierre had said. Of course, I'm not going to go over the majority of what I heard or anything. I'm just going to take little minute-sized clips of portions of the beginning of the podcast, so I am going to be linking the full video down below. Go check that out. But I had some thoughts on some things that he had said, and so let us get into it.
I'd like to hear about your day-to-day schedule and your week-to-week schedule. Like, lay out your job.
Basically, we have two parts to my professional life. It's very bifurcated. There's the Parliament Hill side, which is early morning meeting with my leadership team, House Leader, Deputy Leader, Whip, etc., to plan out the day, the battle plan for our parliamentary committees, question period, etc. That is punctuated by one weekly caucus meeting and just the daily prosecution of the government, which is the quintessential role of an opposition leader. And then the other part to my life is touring. I asked my assistant today how many events we had done over the last year, and he said it was exactly 600. I mean, a few weeks ago it was 570 something. So we've done 600 events, and those are like tours at mills, mines, factories, farms, high-tech facilities, and we tour in, see how the place operates. Then I give a short speech, do a question and answer, and then I just mull about and shake hands with the workers for 25 minutes to an hour, and then I go on to the next stop and do it all over again. And we did that in 9 provinces and 2 territories this year. And so that's a summary of my workload and work plan to do my job.
And so I bring up this little snippet of the podcast to bring up the fact as how Pierre is unlike Trudeau in that he actually cares about the workers, the Canadians who make up Canada so that it continues to function. Pierre clearly shows that he actually cares about what they're doing by meeting with them, shaking hands, talking with them, and coming up with ideas to make their lives better so that Canada can continue to function. Now, there's a little bit more to this that I'm going to bring up with this next clip, so here it is.
And I don't just mean the failures on the Trudeau side. I mean, what do you think you guys are doing right?
Well, we have a clearer mission statement, and people know exactly why we're in this. Whenever someone asks me if they say, I'm thinking of running for parliament or for mayor or some other political position, what's your advice? Well, I said, before I get to the advice, I have a very simple question. Why do you want this job? Mm-hmm. And it might seem like a simplistic question, but it's actually the most important question in life. Why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And our answer to that is to bring back the Canadian promise that anyone who works hard gets a great paycheck and a pension that buys them good food and a nice home and a safe neighborhood, that anyone from anywhere can do anything and that people are in charge of their own lives. That's effectively what we want to deliver. So every day when I'm in Parliament...
So that's a very local vision in a sense, right? It doesn't have the grandiosity of an international utopian vision, for example.
Well, maybe
it's very down to earth.
I think people are sick and tired of grandiosity. In fact, I think there's something grand about a family that can go on a nice road trip and share stories and build lasting memories that the kids will remember when they're 85 years old.
And so I bring this point up to bring about how Pierre is caring more about merit when it comes to these types of things, and merit not only in the sense of what they're physically doing, but also what is going on in the mental when he is asking, why do you want to do this? He is caring more about merit-based working, which, as someone who is trying to do things the right way, I like that. I like that it is not totally nepotism that is working for people to get into certain positions and whatnot like that. And also, I want to bring up and how he's clearly trying to talk to the middle, the middle income, perhaps you could say, of Canadians, which I appreciate because he's trying to talk to the majority of people, which is better than always focusing on the minority over the majority, you know? Now, the next part that I wanted to bring up is how Jordan Peterson brings up the fact of how other leaders are typically brought over, and once they have a leadership, they then turn to being a bad leader, and so on and so forth. And so I'm gonna go over that, and we're gonna talk more about what Pierre said there.
The reason I'm bringing them up as an example is because, well, they were a conservative government, and they certainly didn't govern by anything approximating conservative principles. And so how do you feel about the probability that if the Conservatives in Canada take power, that they'll be enticed into this global utopian delusion that seems to have enveloped so many leaders, kind of regardless of their political stripe? What do you think, if anything, can inoculate you or has inoculated you against that?
I know better.
Well, elaborate. What do you mean?
I'm not going to do that. And it will be hard because the temptation will be, this is the mistake that conservative parties around the world have made countless times. They think, well, anybody who's got a conservative mindset is already voting for me, so I can go off and chase the ideas of my political opponents, and then everyone will love me because I'll have the conservatives due to the fact that I have the name conservative. And then I'll have all these other people because I've embraced their contrary direction.
And so I just bring this up because this is the problem with loving the world rather than loving a higher point of knowledge. If you try to love the world will burn, but if you try to love a higher thing than the world, then the world will flourish because the higher thing knows how to do it properly. Bringing up the Lord's word, or the Lord in this favor. Point being that as a leader, you can't try to be loved by everyone because then you'll be hated by everyone. And that doesn't work for trying to lead people somewhere, because then you're spreading yourself way too thin. That's the problem. You're not saying a whole thing as being like, I am a conservative leader. You're being like, but I can also do this, and now you're just spread too thin. It doesn't work. Earlier, when he was talking to, when we were bringing up the point that he has been talking to working Canadians, Jordan Peterson brings up the question of how have the working Canadians shaped his, or changed his opinion or mindset about things. So let's go over that.
You've listened to all these people, and so what have you learned, and what has it made you convinced of, let's say?
Well, first of all, there's the bad news and the good news. The bad news is that people feel like they've done absolutely everything right, and their lives are trapped. Young people say, look, okay, I went through, I got an education, I work nonstop, and I have made the calculation that there is no mathematical path for me to own a house. Mm-hmm. It's just not possible. In Toronto here, for example, if you take the average income and the average house price, it would take you 29 years to save up for a down payment. So, if you're
for a down payment,
not to pay it off, forget paying it off. And so if you're a young woman who's got a biological clock, obviously, well, do the math. You start off at, let's say you're 25. Well, you're going to be in your 50s before you can afford the average house.
And I bring this point up because he's speaking to someone a lot like myself. I'm just gonna, I guess, interject myself into this whole entire thing because I am a young Canadian growing up into this vast, vacant world of homes not being owned. And he's really speaking to someone like me, someone who is young and working their way through life, because I know I want to have a family, I know I want to have that kind of a thing in my life, I also want to own a home. But with the current way that life is looking, he is absolutely right. The math is not adding up here. I don't want to spend my entire life working towards my kids being able to pay my mortgage. Because that's the world we're currently living in. Like, it's 29 years to get a down payment. At that rate, I am at best 49. Well, maybe 47 if I work at 18 and I'm thinking about that. But point being, I'm basically the age of my parents before I can actually get a down payment. That's not a joke. The mortgage on the house is going to be paid off by my kids. What kind of world is that? Certainly not a world that I want to grow up in, or not a world that I want my kids to grow up in. It doesn't work. That's mainly why I'm doing this, YouTube, rather than going on my way to go to university or college, because what's going to happen then? I'm then going to have a student debt that I'm also going to be paying on top of one day perhaps being able to afford a down payment, let alone a mortgage. Like, the math isn't working. And so now I'm just working towards, I guess, what you'd call a pipe dream of YouTube, to have this turn out and be something that can get me to where I want to be. But this path doesn't work for everyone. I already know that. But it's better I try this than to have my own kids pay off something that I couldn't pay off. If that makes sense. And so, Pierre is really good at speaking to the youth. Speaking to all Canadians, that is. But more so, he's talking about the nuclear family. And that is a very good step in being a leader of a country. The hand that rocks the cradle rocks the world. And if he's talking about benefiting the nuclear family, then that is good. And I appreciate that as someone who is, once again, growing up in a vacant country. A country that has houses, but there's no one in them because no one can afford to get into them. And so, I just really appreciate what Pierre is saying here. And moreover, I'm thinking that an early election will be called, and that will happen. But if it doesn't, I'm going to look forward to Pierre leading our country, because his leadership under NDP or Trudeau or whoever is, whichever party you want to call it that's leading at this rate, it isn't working. It doesn't work. And we need a common sense leader like Pierre. Someone who actually speaks to the majority of Canadians. Someone who actually looks for merit rather than stupidity that gets people jobs. Because that doesn't work in the long term. Merit does. And I'm happy about that. Tell me what you guys are thinking down below, but stay tuned for tomorrow's video. But until then, I hope you have a good one.